Thank you very much. We've been researching with my colleague Vicken for about 10 years now, and we've been putting bits and pieces together, and it has paid off, obviously. And we have become a point where I'm going to be talking, there's been enough explanation about Viscount Shibusawa. I am going to be talking about the Japanese captain. Izmir, known as Smyrna, was the wealthiest of all Ottoman cities. Located in Turkey's Aegean coast, the cosmopolitan city was known as the Pearl of the Orient. But in 1922, where Greeks were a majority, the city also housed sizable Armenian, Jewish, Turkish, European, and American population. September 9, 1922, victorious Turkish soldiers at the end of the 3-year-long Greco-Turkish War, they lit a fire starting from the Armenian quarter and then moved on to the Greek quarter and went on a rampage of rape, pillage, and mass murder. Soon, all but the Turkish quarter was not even touched. The fire lasted 9 days. You can see from the picture how horrible it was. Hundreds of thousands of refugees were crowded on the waterfronts. As the fire approached from the back, they had no place to escape. Some of them fell in the water, some of them swam towards the boats. I guess the sound is lost. Basically, it's showing live pictures of how Smyrna was, and this is the front, the waterfront, where it has been. And you see that there were many churches, a lot of active society, and this is Ataturk, where he ran his troops in there, and these are live footage of the fire of Smyrna. Too bad the sound is not there because there's a lot of explanation. Although, as it was going, there were a lot of, in the harbor, there were 21 military ships, Navy ships. 11 of them were British, 5 were French, 1 was Italian, and 2 large American destroyers. But strict orders have been given from their respective governments not to accept anybody on the boats. So they saw what was going on, but they didn't do anything. The only ship, the first ship, which opened its ladder and allowed people to mount on there, was a Japanese captain. The Allies, the British, French, the Italian, American, ignored the screams of the burning, drowning victims. A nearby Japanese captain acted courageously. We don't know his name yet. We've been working with researchers in Japan, Vicken, myself, and others from Australia. We've known that it's called Tokeimaru, but we haven't found out what is the name of the captain. The Japanese captain was horrified by the massacres and heard the appeals of the refugees. He sent out small boats to pick up as many refugees as possible. The camelists circled the boats. They threatened to sink them. He warned the Turks by telling them that in case of even harming a single refugee's hair, he would consider it as an insult to Japanese flag and would demand an immediate apology from the Turkish government. This was pretty courageous, without even touching base with Tokyo. Seeing the seriousness of the Japanese captain, the camelists decided to let the refugees board the ship. In the wake of Turkish threats, the Japanese action was one of the bravery and outpost display of humanity. 823 refugees from Smyrna who arrived to the island of Piraeus in Greece had tears in their eyes and showed gratitude for the noble act of the Japanese captain and the crew in bringing them to safe shores. You would think 96 years ago, that's what the Japanese captain did, the act of the Japanese captain, would be forgotten. But Berj Jamgochian, who passed away in 2004, he is an Armenian-American organist born in Boston. In 1957, at the age of 27, Berj Jamgochian was appointed organist for the Boston Symphony Orchestra and the Boston Pops. He also performs in the orchestras of Moscow, Japan, Austria, and across the United States. He played for 6 US presidents, the Pope, the British royal family, as well as the imperial family of Japan. He performed at funeral service for John F. Kennedy, actually. But in 1983, the opening ceremony of the temple of Shinji Shumei-kai in Shiga, Japan, where he performed in the presence of 40,000 audience. He surprised the audience with his personal story. And I wish if the lady could come, because the volume, if we can open it, because please, it's very important what he says in front of 40,000 people. The audio is, hope that audio, yes.
In 1983, Meisha Summer Hall was completed, and its spacious interior was to find its musical complement when the Rogers Royal 5 organ was installed. The Royal 5 was designed and built for Virgil Fox. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, the organ has the highest number of timbres, and some now say that the Royal 5 is the finest digital organ in the world. So Kiichi Koyama acquired the Royal 5 and had it installed in Meisha Summer Hall. And Berj Jamgochian was asked to play for the hall's dedication ceremony. On the day of the hall's opening in May of 1983, before the music began, Mr. Jamgochian suddenly began to speak to the audience.
United States of America, my name is not an American name. I am of the Armenian heritage. Armenia has a very venerable history of 3,500 years. Our country was located at the foot of Mount Ararat, and historians have called it the cradle of civilization. Written in the history book, that wonderful history book of the Armenians, are many beautiful and glorious pages, but there are also some very sad and tragic pages. As the people threw themselves into the turbulent seas of the Bosporus, there were Japanese boats, and the Japanese people came to save thousands of lives of Armenians crying for help. And among one of those who jumped into that turbulent sea was a young boy, and that young boy's name was Nazaret Jamgochian.
His father.
He was my father. So in the names of those thousands of people that were saved by the kindness of the Japanese people, in the name of the son of Nazaret Jamgochian, I am here to offer thanks in behalf of the Armenian nation that still lives, as the son of that boy that was saved in a Japanese boat. Kokoro kara arigato gozaimasu.
He came back year after year to play for his friend who passed away suddenly. And during his funeral, actually, Mr. Jamgochan, for hours and hours he played.
He played elegiac music hour after hour, as thousands expressed their grief by laying flowers in Meisha Summer Hall.
Thank you very much.
Maurice, thank you for that powerful and emotional message. If I could have our guest speakers come forward, and any other questions. The first question could be for both of you. How did the Great Depression and the seeming failure of capitalism at the time impact Eiichi Shibusawa?
The Great Depression. Actually, he passed away in 1931, so he didn't see the Depression, actually. So that's that.
Okay.
But I figure there was always recessions and depressions in the past, but I think his story was more about creating sustainable value, and to do that, it's a repeat, but you need the economic side, the business side, and you need the humanity virtue side. And I think he would have said the same thing during the Depression era as well.
Okay. Someone writes, first and foremost, a big thank you for this most memorable event, celebrating Armenian-Japanese friendship. The question is, do the organizations of this most unique event have a developed master plan that would foster further cooperation between Armenia, Japan, and USA? We don't right yet, but I'll let Vanna talk about that as well, but I think that's a great idea. So that wasn't a question, sorry. So it says, I believe Japan was the first, if not one of the first, if not the first country to recognize the first Republic of Armenia officially. Do you have any historic information on this? Was Mr. Shibusawa or Diana Amgar involved in this?
As far as I know, well, Japan was a signatory to the Treaty of Sèvres. And I think I haven't done, my research has been based on Near East relief and Japan's humanitarian response. So I don't know too much about the history of Japan-Armenian relations in terms of the establishment of the Armenian Republic. So I won't be able to answer that question. So I won't know.
Okay. Someone writes, I understand there's an Armenian Studies Department in a Japanese university. Is this correct? Any ideas about Japanese investments? And the second question was, are Japanese investments in Armenia?
Well, again, I don't specialize on relations today, apart from the knowledge that we have of Japan International Cooperation Agency, that does contribute quite a lot of funds to help Armenia in many fields, as I explained earlier. But in terms of the Armenian Studies program in Japan, again, I don't know much about that. My focus is on history of what happened 100 years ago, particularly the work of the American Near East Relief Organization, and also Australia's humanitarian response.
Thank you. And they're asking what the total population of Armenian global diaspora today, and how many in Armenia? I guess the population of Armenia and how many have?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, Armenia has a population of about 3.5 million, and the total population of Armenians around the world, I think, is between 7 and 10 million. But we don't know exact numbers, because Armenians have had a diaspora in 4 corners of the world, and often they don't, in the censuses, write that they're Armenian. So no one really knows exactly how many Armenians there are in the world, but I would say between 7 and 10 million is kind of the figure, the range.
Okay. And do either of you have any last statements or comments that you'd like to make?
There's an expression in Japanese called goen, which, how do you translate that into English? We use it a lot, and it basically means connecting, and that it's sort of like when you connect, and it's sort of like in the destiny, things like that. And for me, I never realized that there was, for me, goen with the Armenian community growing up, and until actually 6 months ago. But once you establish this goen, the connection, it keeps on going, and once you connect, you can connect it to the other people. And so when I go back to Japan, one thing I'm going to do is, because I think most Japanese people don't know about this because it's unknown history. And I guess my role for being here today with you is not just explain about Shibusawa Eiichi, what he did in the past, but about our future. And I think one of my roles is to share the story that I heard today with my people. So that's my last comment.
I have a lot to say about this, my last statement, but what I want to say is that for the past 100 years, most historians on the Armenian genocide have focused on the evils that have been committed. And that's partly due to the fact that the Turkish government has denied what happened. But there's much more history to the Armenian genocide than just the evils that were committed. There was a massive humanitarian response that was international. And it's so well documented. The amount of documentation is much more than the documentation of the genocide. It is scattered all over the world in private archives, in universities, institutions, government archives. It's like fragments everywhere. And Missak, myself, and a few historians have been concentrating on this, and we just can't believe the more we look, the more we find. And my message to the Armenian community is that we need to research this more. And there were many, many prominent Americans, for example, who were involved in this relief effort. And for example, in 1919, 1920 to 25, there were 1,000 Americans who went to the Middle East as relief workers. And majority of these Americans, because cameras were available back then, took photographs, they wrote letters, documentation, and they are scattered all over in different archives. I've come across a few. And also, for example, on eBay over the years, I've seen a lot of private collections go for sale of photographs from that period. And it's all important because it's part of America's social and cultural history. And it resonates with the American people, this history, just like it does with the Japanese people on Japan's humanitarian response. And I know with my research on Australia's humanitarian history, it is actually changing Australia's First World War narrative. Because up until this point, it has been narrowly viewed from a military lens. And the fact that I was able to show that even Australians who were prisoners of war in Turkey at that time witnessed the Armenian genocide and had sympathy. And also there was a huge humanitarian relief effort in Australia at the time and in the post-war period up until 1930. After I wrote my book, we're starting to see a lot of Australian academics using it as a reference when they're writing a general history of Australia and World War I. So it's kind of changing the narrative and the collective memory of Australians of that war. But the Australian response, the Japanese response, does not compare anything to the American response. The American response encompassed all of America. Every state by the 1920s had an Armenian Relief Committee, and you usually had the most prominent individuals of that state as members. So I think a lot more digging and research needs to be done to bring that into life. And you'll find that Americans will be more interested in that history because it's their ancestors, it's their descendants who were part of that relief effort. So that's the last thing I'd like to say to the Armenian, to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give another round of applause for our guest speakers. And I'd like to welcome back to the podium Ms. Vanna Kitsinian.
Sorry about that. It is said that compassion without action is just observation. And I think that we can all agree that after hearing from both Mr. Babkenian and Mr. Shibusawa, that Viscount Shibusawa was a shining example of compassion, action, and humanitarianism, values which still exist in modern Japanese society today. Mr. Babkenian and Mr. Shibusawa, thank you both for literally crossing land and sea to be here to shed light on this important chapter of world history and to celebrate the advocacy of Viscount Shibusawa, who moved to action all levels of Japanese society to extend humanitarian aid to their fellow men. Thank you for your informative, heartfelt, and inspiring addresses. For all your efforts, the ANCA Western Region Community Relations Committee would like to give you a small token of our appreciation with a plaque to memorialize this wonderful evening. And as I read each of the texts on your plaques, I invite you each to approach the podium, please. Vicken, Babkenian. It reads, in appreciation for your tireless efforts in researching and unveiling the shared history of Japan and Armenia, March 2018, Armenian National Committee of America. Honoring Viscount Eiichi Shibusawa's exceptional leadership of the Armenian Relief Committee of Japan in 1922, presented with gratitude to Ken Shibusawa, March 2018, Armenian National Committee of America, Western Region. Mr. Ken Shibusawa, the Armenian people of yesterday, today, and tomorrow say a heartfelt arigato. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take just two group photos, and I'd like to ask Consul General Chiba and Maurice and Vanna, and we'll stand right in front of the flags. And then the ANCA committee, if you could get ready to join a larger photo after we take this photo, and Jeff Yamazaki, Toby Mallon, and Yu Tanabe from the board of the Japan-American Society will also join that.